The problem, though, for some of those fleet cards that you're talking about is that they're built on technology that's really decades old at this point.
Daniel Simon is the founder and CEO of Coast, a company that provides an expense management platform and charge card for companies with fleets of vehicles. Specialized software offers control, security, visibility, and reporting for businesses like plumbing companies that need to manage expenses for their employees on the road.
They're very inflexible. The user experience for the drivers isn't great, and the data that comes back from them, because of the way the cards can be abused or misused, can be unreliable.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize. So it's not really just a fuel card; it's an expense card, essentially.
And they don't really give you flexibility to control different policies based on the right employees, based on the right vehicles.
Daniel, welcome to the Sideshed podcast.
Thanks so much, Matt. It's great to be here.
Joining us all the way from downtown Manhattan.
A long way away. And you're in sunny Australia. Happy to talk to you.
Not so sunny at the moment, but yeah, typically sunny. We've had one of those Januaries where it's been torrential rain pretty much the entire thing. It's been crazy.
Oh no.
My wife's from Canada and her father's out here on a holiday, and it's just been raining the whole time.
Oh wow.
But that's what you get. We live in a tropical monsoon climate, so it can be expected. Anyway, we're here today to talk a little bit about navigating employee expenses, a conversation which I think many business owners' ears will prick up to. So do you want to give us a little bit of insight as to who you are and what you do and where you come from and blah, blah, blah?
Sure. Happy to introduce myself. So my name is Daniel Simon. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Coast. Coast is an expense management platform and a charge card, a credit card basically, for companies that operate fleets of vehicles. So for example, if you run a plumbing company, you need to give the plumber who works for you the company credit card when they take the van out to go to do their job, to buy gas or other things that they need on the road. You need specialized control, security, visibility, reporting. You need the kind of software that we sell. Prior to this, ran another payments and technology company called Bread, which was sort of a consumer buy now, pay later software. So if you're shopping online and you want to pay for something in installments, making that really easy for both the consumer and the merchant, taking a lot of the lessons in credit and payments from that business and applying it now in a commercial application to help the trades business owners and managers really control and have visibility over their field expenses.
Yeah, okay. I know I grew up in the plumbing game. I was in another life. I was a plumber, and we used to have the fleet cards that we'd use for fuel and that kind of thing. So is this kind of similar thing?
Yes, exactly right. What this is a new generation of what we think of as a smart fleet card. So there have been for decades, in the United States at least, a couple of businesses that offer specialized solutions for controlling field expenses. Because if you run one of these businesses, you don't want to give a general purpose corporate card to your employees who are out there in the field, because you want to make sure that they're spending on the right things. You want to have visibility. You want to know how many gallons of gas did they buy? What was the grade of that gas? Were they buying commercial vehicle diesel gas, or were they in the convenience store buying, chips and snacks and, sodas, et cetera? And so these specialized cards can do what your basic bank credit card and the software behind it can't really do. The problem, though, for some of those fleet cards that you're talking about is that they're built on technology that's really decades old at this point. They're very inflexible. The user experience for the drivers isn't great, and the data that comes back from them, because of the way the cards can be abused or misused, can be unreliable. And they don't really give you the flexibility to control different policies based on the right employees, based on the right vehicles, et cetera. So while they have become, these companies, huge and hugely profitable, there really hasn't been a lot of innovation in the category for a long time. So we've taken the basic need, the pain point that businesses have of needing to have specialized control when their employees are in the field with the company vehicle, and given them a modern, real-time desktop and mobile web, digitally native expense management software that provides a ton more flexibility. So in many ways, this is a successor next generation to the category of product that you're remembering.
So, I mean, you mentioned a couple of things like misuse and abuse, like having that dashboard reporting available. Like, what are some of the things that you see that we traditionally, I suppose, see being misused with like the former fleet card or traditional fleet card style of credit card?
Well, sure. So, I mean, a few related categories of things that people will sometimes do is first, you can just take the fleet card and go use it to fill up, the family car if you're, hauling the boat out to the lake for the weekend, right? And that's harder to spot because you don't have necessarily an easy way to do that attribution. In a modern solution like ours, we would be able to, for instance, be able to get the real-time GPS location of the vehicle that you're supposed to be assigned to in the exact moment that you're trying to swipe the card. And if they're far apart, you can either decline the transaction, flag it for later review, etc. Some of the sort of traditional fuel cards will have controls to try to stop abuse by, for instance, saying you have a maximum number of charges that you can authorize on a card in a given day. Well, what we see, like a lot of our customers telling us, is a very common practice is one of two things will happen. Either they'll use that authorized, that allowed authorization to fill up the commercial vehicle, and then the same pump, the wife is behind in the family car, so they can steal gas that way. Or
Oh,
they'll put a bladder over the gas tank of the commercial vehicle so that they can overfill it and sell the extra gas to the next guy in line at a
what?
discount so they can pocket it. Yeah, fraud is the mother of invention. People come up with all sorts of stuff. Now, I want to make it very clear, like if you're running one of these trades businesses, the majority of your employees are trustworthy partners of yours that you might have been working with for a long time, and that you have a good working relationship with. But the few bad apples that inevitably pop up in these kinds of businesses can make it really difficult for the rest, because the impact of that kind of abuse actually hits the business's bottom line. And now you, as a business owner, have to look distrustfully at all of the guys who are actually the good guys in your business. And it really sort of creates an environment where there isn't sort of more collaboration between management and the technicians. And so we think these kinds of modern solutions that give the confidence and visibility to management can create better trust with the employees that are not trying to come up with these crazy schemes that I'm describing now.
So is this kind of where the policies come into place? Like you can assign various policies which have limitations or restrictions on how the cards can be used and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's precisely right, Matt. So what Coast allows you to do, as a kind of a next generation fleet card, is you can create policies that you can assign different people in your company to. You can assign different vehicles in your company to, or you can use both together. It's quite flexible. The policies will be able to say things like, hey, for my, Dallas, Texas based technicians, they should only be able to purchase such an amount of fuel in a given week. And
Right.
they should have that sort of GPS location based flagging turned on. If they make a purchase of greater than a certain amount, then they need to submit a memo, and we'll talk about how that works as well. And you can combine them together to say, for instance, things like, Matt can purchase up to $200 a week, but this Ford F-150 that he's driving should never take more than $300 total, regardless of who's driving it. We're
Wow.
able to dynamically match the expense at the time of the purchase with the right vehicle and driver, so that we can see across all of your vehicles and drivers in your fleet. Even if you've got different guys switching vehicles, sharing cards, you want visibility at the level of the employee and at the level of your vehicle asset, and that combination, the line item detail. Policies is what allows us to do this, and allows us to make changes in real time, even if somebody's using the same card, for what they're allowed or not allowed to do.
So if for whatever reason they were going on a huge trip and they needed an extra tank of gas, they could in real time request that.
Exactly. And one of the things that sort of differentiates this next generation of a fleet card and expense management platform for the trades from what came before is really the use of that mobile device as part of the process. we're able, when you
Right.
pick up the card from the glove box through either an app or SMS-based workflow, to authenticate you, Matt, are the one who's using the card right there and then, and we know it's you because of some authentication that we're doing over SMS or with the phone.
Ah.
Um, and so what we can do with that, like now that we know that, like in the real world now, everyone's carrying a phone and everybody texts, right? If you get declined for any reason, uh, you'll receive an SMS notification that says, "Hey, Matt, you just tried to buy more gas than you're allowed to do, so you're not able to proceed with this transaction. But would you like to request an exception from your manager?" And then you can respond yes. Automatically, Coast will send a message to your manager with a note from you about why you need to do this and exactly the purchase that you're attempting to make. And the manager, if they choose, can say, "Okay, I'm going to allow this," allowing you to then make another attempt, and then it'll go through and you're on your way. That's something that just wouldn't be possible in an old generation, to have that kind of real time, one off, very contextual, very dynamic kind of control and visibility over what your technicians are doing in the field.
Sure. Yeah, I remember back in the day we used to the service station attendant used to always ask for your mileage. You know how many k's are on the car, like I guess as a gauge of. I guess that got logged, and then management could track how many k's you've done per tank or something like that. But no one ever did it. Everyone
Yeah.
just put the date in.
Well, so that point that you're making is exactly one of the problems. So I mentioned earlier that the
Mm.
older generation of these kinds of tools didn't have really reliable data, because you're right. Like the way that these old systems work is that when you're at the gas pump, the automated fuel dispenser, I'm sure you've seen there's like a little dial pad next to the pump. And if you put in one of these old fuel cards, they'll ask you, okay, what's your driver ID? What's your vehicle identification number? What's your PIN? And what's your odometer reading, as another example of what's very often asked. First off, drivers will share pins all the time. So, it's just like not exactly the most attributable security to what people are actually buying. And you're right, when you get to the odometer screen, like if you've gotten out of the cab of the vehicle in the freezing cold, you've forgotten what the odometer reading is. You just hit 99999, right? And like now, your boss won't necessarily be able to know, like, did the miles per gallon make sense, and like is something fishy going on here, as much as they'd like to have that kind of control. With this new generation, we've kind of done away with all of that stuff, right? So first of all, we know who you are based on that mobile check-in workflow that I was describing earlier. If we're not connected to the vehicle's telematics, we can just ask you, before you're allowed to use the card, as a matter of your policy, to text us the odometer reading so that we can report it. And if it looks wrong, by the way, we'll say, "Hey, Matt, that doesn't look right. Are you sure that that's what you meant?" And you can say, "Yes, for sure, that's what I meant," but then it's going to get flagged in the system for your boss to review. Or you say, "Oh, whoops, I put that in wrong. Let me put in the correct reading while I'm looking at it in the dash of the cab that I'm sitting in." But we can also connect directly in real time to your vehicle's onboard telematics or connected telematics. So if you're using
Mm.
solutions with the GPS trackers that are plugged into the data port of the onboard computer of your vehicle, which more and more businesses are using because it provides enormous control and visibility to our customers, we can just get it from the vehicle without you having to tell us what it is, and report that back to management to make sure that everything is working okay at the time of the fill up. So it's another example of how kind of these modern technologies and our ability to integrate with the rest of the toolkit of these businesses makes it easier for the technician, but also more reliable and actionable data for the manager.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, now that you mention it, like it is kind of it is kind of an archaic system, I suppose. Those old, I mean, like, I don't think they've changed. I mean, I can't remember the last time they've changed until they've had this conversation, So it's a pretty innovative take on it.
Most of the systems also run on special proprietary networks. Most of, at least in the United States, the volume of payments for these kinds of fuel cards don't run on Visa and MasterCard. They run on these special built, purpose built
Mm.
systems that they've integrated with these gas stations over the course of a
Yeah,
really, really
that's
long
right.
time. But what that means is there's certain limitations of what you can do. First, it means that these cards will only work at those gas stations who have integrated them, which isn't all of them, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to if you were working with a Visa or MasterCard, it would work just wherever Visa and MasterCard are accepted, which in the United States, in the forecourt gas pumps in front of the convenience store is basically everywhere, right? But the second thing is, it means it doesn't work for other kinds of purchases that you might really need to care about when your technicians are out in the field, right? So since they only work at places like gas stations that have explicitly integrated them, it makes it much more difficult to have a system for your technicians when they need to pay for parking tickets, tolls, car washes, parts and maintenance, or maybe picking up extra supplies at Home Depot when you didn't get them from the warehouse, or you're just missing a tool for the job that you happen to be on, right? So for that kind of stuff, historically, in many cases, businesses have had to have a second program for those kinds of expenses. Either they're giving a general purpose credit card to their technicians, which again opens you up to all sorts of possibilities for abuse and fraud, or they have to do a cumbersome system of receipts and reimbursing the driver. And it's really a headache. Because Coast is built on top of the Visa network, which, as the old tagline goes, we're everywhere you want to be, we are able to give in our software really powerful and precise controls within policies to say exactly who in your fleet can spend how much, when, at which different kinds of merchant categories to enable this, right? And we can set policies to say, for instance, Matt can spend, $100 a week on hardware and supplies. And by the way, he should text us a photo of the receipt anytime he makes a hardware and supplies purchase over $25 or whatever threshold you want to set, which again is enabled by the fact that we know that you're using a mobile device. It's part of the workflow of how the program works. What that means now is that, like, unlike the old system, which had these like very closed proprietary networks for fuel payments, working with Visa, we're able to say you can have one program, you have very precise control and visibility, but now it works across all these different other kinds of categories of spend that you might really care about for your business.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize. So it's not really just a fuel card; it's an expense card, essentially. Like you can use it at hardware and suppliers. That's great.
Yeah, you got it exactly right. We really think of ourselves as an expense management and charge card for fleet operating companies. You can walk it down to just fuel if you want to do, like, which is obviously kind of like the very first thing that a lot of people want, but understanding that you have the control to choose, how you can separately control everything else, again, enabled by our partnership with Visa, is exactly the kind of new category of product that we think that we've created.
Is there sort of a sideways question? Is there a point reward system tied into it through Visa?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we give, first off, a flat reward for everybody of 2 cents per gallon anywhere you buy. That's our base reward. But we also work with a number of major chains of fuel brands and convenience store brands to offer additional discounts. So, for instance, we have a partnership with ExxonMobil, so our customers receive an additional 2 cents per gallon when they use the Coast card on top of our base reward at any ExxonMobil in the United States. We have a partnership with a regional chain in the Southeast called Racetrack Raceway. They put in another couple of cents. Regional chain in the Midwest called Casey's. They put in another 4 cents. They've got 2,000 locations. And we're growing that network every day. With a bunch of folks that but I will say that for our customers who aren't really in trucking, they're much more in trades. They care a lot less about the reward than they care about the control, because those businesses, the ones that we serve, typically spend between 3 and 5% of their revenue on gas, as opposed to like in trucking where it's like 40 or 50% of their revenue gets spent on gas. Saving a few pennies off on a gallon of gas makes a lot less difference to them than making sure that there isn't abuse, that their drivers can fill up wherever gas is cheapest and wherever it's most convenient for their route, to save the time that they have to spend. Our customers, when they're surveyed, have told us that, like, moving to Coast from a different fuel card solution, they save 16 hours a month in terms of reconciliation or oversight or kind of other kinds of checking processes. So they can focus on growing their business. Like what they really care about is getting more jobs done and earning more revenue, right? And that's what we enable, and it's a value proposition that's a lot more than the reward. But we do have the base reward, and if you use the product for anything other than fuel, we give you 1% cash back on all of those non-fuel categories as well.
I suppose I ask more in light of companies that have quite large expenses through hardware and material supplies and things like that. We've got clients that spend $100,000 a month on their Amex, which pretty much is a return flight to LA. Like there's a so it would be probably within their interest at the moment. It's like they like using those cards because they can rack up so many points.
Yeah, the 1% cashback on non-fuel is enough to get us a really interesting conversation, and a lot of that non-fuel spend moved over to Coast. I will mention, by the way, since we're talking about us being a general expense management solution, that we've also built features that go beyond even the field expenses to really allow one of these kinds of companies to use Coast as a single solution with precise control and visibility uh, for back office and, to your point, inventory and supplies purchases. So, for instance, like we have a customer who's nationally operating HVAC construction commercial business. They've got 200 employees. They've got 125 vehicles, and they're putting $2 million a year of fuel onto Coast, but they're putting $5 million a year of other expenses onto Coast for back office expenses. We give them tools like they can create virtual cards for secure payments online, read directly out of the software. We sync expenses in a categorized way to jobs into your QuickBooks Online accounting system, and we're adding other accounting systems as well. And so what we'll see is, like, for that customer, they'll put $90,000 for HVAC inventory and supplies for a given job in a single transaction onto Coast using virtual cards, because for them, sort of all that control and visibility, all the time savings, and the ease of use makes it a no-brainer for them to bring a lot of that other expense onto Coast as well. And we're continuing to build out the functionality to make that holistic offering really, really compelling. The core use case is the field expenses, but we're really expanding it to do more for these kinds of businesses. And the 1% cash back is something they definitely appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it sounds quite revolutionary. I mean, I know in the past I still have team members that have company credit cards. You don't really know what they're spending it on until you get the report. But yeah, I think it sounds like a brilliant idea. I like it. But you were saying offline before. At the moment, it's sort of US based, but with hopes to expand. Is that the idea?
That's right. And when we think about that expansion, again, I want to sort of point to our partnership with Visa, who have been excellent partners in working with us on sort of the development of the product as well as the commercialization to different geographies. We have started in the U.S. And obviously we've got our hands full. It's not exactly a tiny market around here, but we do have conversations with Visa about expansion to Canada and actually about expansion to Australia as well. There's definitely stuff to work out. The market environment isn't exactly the same. The payments networks and the way that they operate and the merchant terminals at gas stations aren't exactly the same, but we know that we will expand. I couldn't sit here and tell you exactly when this is going to be available on the Gold Coast of Australia, but do hold your breath for at least some amount of time. We'll get there one day.
The suspense is killing me, mate. No, look, it's super interesting. I think it's how did you come into this innovation? What spurred it?
It's funny. I always wish that there was a romantic story to tell here, right? I always wish that, like, I wish sometimes you talk to founders of technology startups, and they're like, oh, well, it all happened when I couldn't make a gas purchase or something like that. And no, I wasn't like playing with toy trucks when I was a kid or anything like that. I was just playing with computers. No, it honestly, it was just my discovery of this entire business category of fleet payments. Like I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, it's my second go round at having a technology startup, and I built the last one, which I started 10 years ago, to be pretty sizable. And like I said, just learned a ton about credit and payments with this installment solution for a modern online shopping experience. When I left that business, I knew I was going to build something new in payments and credit, but didn't really know what it was that was going to excite me. And it was really some venture capitalist who I had known from my previous life who had said to me, hey, Daniel, you should take a look at these companies that sell fleet cards. And I said, what's that? And I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, I haven't been able to think about anything else ever since. The dynamics of the market are so interesting because these companies that, like I said, are just absolutely huge, right? Are serving like a really critical need for a massive sector of the economy, a real pain point that they have, but with technology that, again, hasn't really seen enormous amounts of innovation for a really long time, don't always provide the very best customer service, don't really have technology always as sort of the first and foremost way that they operate. I looked at those dynamics and I felt, I've really got to be able to build something great here. And I just got really excited about the market and the opportunity. And yeah, we've been off to the races ever since.
So did you guys go through rounds of funding for this?
Yeah, we're a venture capital backed business. So we're backed by actually some of the best venture capitalists in the world, I would say, like companies like Excel and Insight. We've done a couple major rounds of funding. We're a team of some 55 people here in New York City,
wow.
And we're and we're growing pretty quickly.
Wow. Yeah, cool. Oh man, it's super exciting. Good on you. Congratulations. How was the that venture capital was that familiar from your last startup, or was that kind of new?
It was familiar because the prior company actually had, seed round, Series A, B, C. So, I certainly was familiar with that world, which made it easier the second time around to navigate. It's never truly easy. Obviously, capital isn't free in the world, and you really need to get people to see the vision of what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is something really, really big, right? And that's what sort of venture capital wants to see, is like a way to build something at a transformational scale. We're trying to help a lot of people. I mean, you look at it, in the US alone, you've got $120 billion being run on these fleet fuel cards in a given year. It's a huge number. And there's probably at least 500,000 companies that have at least half a dozen vehicles that need this product category and that aren't always being served now by the best solutions. If you look at sort of venture capital backed financial technology companies over the last 10 to 15 years, let's say, you've seen a ton of innovation for consumers, like people like you and me, like using great new products, and for certain kinds of companies like other venture capital backed startups. But these kinds of main street businesses, like all of these folks in the trades, all these folks that are running vehicle fleets, they haven't always been served by that same kind of technology innovation, but the market for it is absolutely enormous. And so I think that that vision is something that investors can get excited about, because again, it can be quite transformational at a very large scale.
Sure. No, I think it's it's definitely I think if it was available out here, it'd be very, very well received.
I'm looking for excuses to make a trip out there, so that I appreciate that feedback.
Bit of a tax write-off. There you go. Well, mate, look, thank you very much for the conversation. For all you US-based visitors out there, the website's coastpay.com. There'll be links and everything in the show notes. But if you guys do have teams out there that are spending money on general expenses and fuel and that kind of thing, I definitely recommend checking this out. Like, this is something as innovative as I've seen. So congratulations to you, Daniel. I think you've done a great job here. It looks excellent.
Well, I really appreciate the kind words, Matt, and I really appreciate the conversation too. I really enjoyed it. It's easy for people to get in touch with us if they want to learn more by going to that website. We always also love to hear from folks about the kinds of issues and problems that they've run into managing their fleet, managing their expenses, so we can keep improving the product quickly and serve more people in the way that suits them.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, mate. Well, I wish you all the best. And for you listeners out there or viewers, again, if you want to get hold of Daniel, you want to go check this out, head over to CoastPay, COAST, pay.com. And that's the website. There's there's a really cool interactive dashboard there where you can actually go and have a play with it, see how it looks, which is very clever. I encourage you guys to go check that out. Daniel, thank you once again for your time. I'll let you get back to your afternoon/evening.
Thank you so much, Matt. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Okay, that's a wrap.
New Zealand-based home renovation company, 6,593% ROAS. Sydney-based solar company, 2,700% ROAS. Hunter region-based bathroom renovation company, 5,616% ROAS. Melbourne-based building company, 13,182% return on ad spend. Adelaide-based solar company, 2,881% return on ad spend. Guys, the list goes on and on. If you're a trade-based business and you work with projects, projects like roofing, solar, bathroom renovations, kitchen renovations, anything like that, head across to tradie.wiki/pod for podcast. Tradie.wiki/pod for podcast. Book in a conversation. It is game changing.